So here, like so far we have seen like how to expose our services, how to create endpoints in REST controller. But the thing is like we did not touch the part which is related to consume the API. Let's say there are some system, they have exposed their services. They have exposed their endpoints, and that endpoints we need to consume from our side. So in that scenario, we have to write REST client. Okay. So what is the REST client and what are these things? Let me explain quickly. So let's say if we have two system, there is some two system like one is there are two banks. One is let's say Bank of America. Okay. Exposed few services for other banks.
Credit card payments from one bank.
Any kind of services, like let's say you are the client of Bank of America. You have a credit card, or maybe you have some kind of debit card of Bank of America. You usually just go to any ATM and you can just withdraw money, right? If it is something like Citibank ATM or anywhere. But how they know you are the authenticate user, you are the authenticate person, and you have certain balance that limit you can withdraw from that ATM? How they don't know? So let's say there is one more bank that is called Citibank. Okay. Now it is consuming services from other bank. So here you are the customer of Bank of America. You visited the ATM of Citibank. There you withdraw some money. You swipe your card in their Citibank ATM machine, and you got your money. So how Citibank knows like you are the person, authenticate person, and Citibank will allow you to withdraw money from their ATM. So in that scenario, REST client comes into the picture. Means Bank of America exports some services from their end. Okay. And what happened? Other bank will consume those services to just access their services. Since you are the customer of Bank of America and Citibank wants to know like you are the authenticate person. So Citibank will consume the service of Bank of America, and whatever the username, password, what I mean, when you go to ATM, usually you put your PIN number. So that PIN number Citibank authenticate using their Bank of America service. This concept is clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is what today we are going to develop. Okay. That is what today we are going to develop. We will consume some existing endpoint which is already being running on somewhere hosted. Okay. That endpoint we will call from our local. So I'll show you quickly that endpoints which we are going to consume. Okay. So you can see I have opened my Postman, and there are one endpoint here. You can see this endpoint. It is nothing but it is a GET request, and it is already being running on somewhere we have hosted this endpoint. If I click on here, send, I will receive this objects. So these are the list of objects. Can you see here? So when we call this service from Postman, we usually receive this response. Okay.
What's saying active development status is equal to false?
This is nothing but this is the endpoint. We don't need to care about it. Okay. This is just an endpoint URL which we have to call it to get this response back. So let's say this is the bank URL. Okay. And you want to get your balance, something, balance detail, get balance detail. So definitely you will create one endpoint. And Bank of America has created an endpoint. Passing your username, ID, or credential, you will receive this response back from the Bank of America. But what we wanted to do, we just wanted to call that their services from our end and we'll get the response back. So for what, to calling their services, there would be like certain authentication part, there would be like something we have to pass the authorization part. So these two things we have to take care of, and we have to call it when we call their services. Okay. So what I'm trying to explain here, we have an existing endpoint. This will only call, let's say if I call it from browser, I'll show you here. Since it's a GET request, and when I put enter, it will ask me to put username and password, right? If I give the username and password, I will get the response back from this API. Okay. So this is just like a example of basic authorization.
And then how do we do the testing our end? Do we have access for this username and password?
Yeah, that's what, like when you see, I mean, since when you place a request, since you are calling this service, right? So in the request form, you can pass that credentials.
Okay. No,
While
I mean,
calling this API
can I
itself,
use this? Can we use this API?
yeah, you can use it.
Okay.
If you know the username password, see, let's say I've created this API for you. Your credentials are registered in my database. Okay.
Okay.
So you know your credentials. Once you call this API, you will use the same credential and you will be able to call this API, correct?
Okay.
So how do we do it in programmatical way? How do we consume it? That is what. That's what I wanted to show you today. So there are few things when you want to create or when you want to consume API from your system, you have to do some initial configuration. Then you have to write some code, and then you have to proceed further. So I'll start from beginning. What are the configuration required while consuming API? So this is called consuming API. Why we are calling it consuming API? Because someone has already exposed their API. So this API you see here, this endpoint, it's already being running on somewhere server, right? And these are available to consume it. If you know proper credentials, you can access it, right? So same instance from here, let's say Bank of America have already exposed their endpoints for other banks, the partner banks. Okay, we can say it partner banks. So if they expose their services for their partner banks, so partner bank means like Citibank, what they can do, they can call Bank of America endpoint. Means Citibank is trying to consume Bank of America endpoints, which is being exposed by the Bank of America. Is it clear?
Yeah.
All right. So let's get back to the code now. I was talking about the configuration part. I'll show you what are the configuration initially required. So first, if you see here this class name, I have written is as REST client config, right? So REST client config means when we talk about like consuming API means we ourselves pretend as a client. Therefore, and since these are all communication is happening with in REST, Therefore, we call it as a REST client config. Okay. Now coming to the class, if you see here, I just created a bin inside it. So first I am using here an annotation that is called configuration annotation. Okay. So configuration means you are telling to the Spring that this class will be behave like a configuration class. And if you are creating a configuration class, it means you can define bins. Bins means we are using the REST template, which comes from this package. You see here, org Spring Boot Framework web.client. To inject the bin at runtime, we have to create a bin here in the configuration. Okay. To create a bin for REST template, this is the way you can see here. We are using REST template builder. Using the REST template builder, we just created the object of REST template. That's it inside this bin. This is the configuration. It's very simple. And why we are creating REST template, you will understand further when I will explain this tutorial. Okay. Any doubt so far?
No.
All right. So let me jump into the client code. We have already created one package com.ats this here client. Here I have created one service class. So let me expand it. So for now, you will see the everything will be here is hard coded values, right? So what we can do, I'll explain one by one. Later on, we will refactor this code. But since I wanted to keep it very basic things, so therefore I just arrange this code in this way. So what we have done, we have created one class that name is web service client. This class is marked as a service. So this class, we are treating as class this as a service class. Here you are seeing auto wired REST template. Can you see here? So why we are using auto wired REST template? Because we need the capability to consume API, other APIs, third party APIs. So for that, we need this object REST template, and that is what we have configured here initially, REST template, right? So once you configured here, then you have to auto wire this object here where you going to create your client. Once you have created, once you auto wired this object, then what you have to do it. So few things I'll tell you one by one. First, since we are using Spring Boot basic authorization, basic authentication part, it means you have to pass your username, colon along with the password. So for this API, you are seeing this URL. This is nothing but this is the endpoint. You see here. For this, we have to use credentials to access this API. So for the credentials, we have written like this. So this is the way you have to write, like first your username, colon, password. Okay. So it is in form of a string. Then what you have to do it? You have to convert it into the byte array. So here we are converted that credential into byte array. Then once you converted that string into byte array, what you have to do it? You have to encode into the base 64 format. Okay. So again, you are converting that byte array into the base 64 encoded format. Then you will receive some byte codes in the form of array. And then you have to get it into the string format. It is clear for now, or do you have any kind of doubt?
So this is a mandatory to access.
For what? I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Since if you are, let's say, in real world, you will definitely create that kind of API where you wanted to make it secure API, correct?
Yeah.
You don't want to anyone can call this API anyone, you don't want to allow them. Whatever the your contract created with your channel partner or any vendors, you only want to allow them to call your API. So how they can call your API once they have these credentials, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So this part so far we have discussed. Now coming to this part, HTTP headers. So when you trying to create or call some third party API, you have to pass some kind of information in the form of header. So here is the header object. This comes from this package. Okay. Once you created this header object, what you have to do it inside the header, you have to set authorization part. So since this is the basic authorization, so first key, this is something like a map. So this is the key and this complete itself as a value. So basic plus base 64 credential, whatever you are getting it, converting into the base 64, this credential into base 64, you have to pass in that way. Okay. You already set it into the header object. Then we have to define the URL, which exactly URL we are going to call to consume some other third party API. So this is the third party API. You see here, we have defined here, okay, in the form of URL here. Now you have to create one request object. Why a request object? Whenever you call some API, you have to pass your request to consume their response back, correct? So therefore, we have created this HTTP entity and we have set it all those header information, whatever we have already, and we are passing into the HTTP entity. Okay. Once you created HTTP entity, then what you have to do it? Then again, this REST template object, if you see here, we auto add initially, it has some method exchange. Exchange means you are exchanging something. You're passing some information from your side in the form of headers, and then you will receive some response back from this API. Which API? This one. Clear?
Mm.
So what are the parameter you have to pass? First, you have to pass the URL itself. So this is the URL. URL means this is the endpoint URL that you have to pass. Again, you have to tell them which kind of method is this. So it is a GET request only. Okay. So we have to define here, it is a GET request. Then we have to pass this request object. This request object is nothing but it's a form of HTTP entity and it contains the header information here. Okay. And what we are going to receive from this endpoint, so we will receive as a string response back. So why it is a string? Because we will receive some kind of list of objects in the form of JSON payload, and JSON payload we consider as a string. Okay. So once it comes into the response, what we can do, we can get it the body from this response, and that response is just nothing but it's an string. It's clear so far?
Yeah.
Or
I have a
any
question,
doubt
bro.
you have? Yes, yes, super, go ahead.
So line number 32.
Mhm.
What is basic doing here?
This one?
Yes.
Okay. Let me explain this part. So I told that header itself is just like a map. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mean it can hold the value in the form of key and value. Key means this is the key and this is the value. So if you notice here, the key what we are passing here as a key authorization, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Authorization means how can you access this endpoint? That is the authorization part, right?
Yes.
Whether you are able to access or not, it's completely depend on whatever the credential you are passing. So credential is nothing but here we have written the credential initially.
Okay.
and, and how this API means this API, how they know like you are the authenticated person, you are the authorized person, or you are
Yes.
passing the right credential, how they know? So they will know in the form of header information.
So
So
let's say Citibank
mhm,
is consuming Bank of America's API, right?
yes.
So How Citibank know this is like I am a authenticated user of Bank of America?
So when you
How they
go to their
verify my
machine,
credentials?
yes, that's what I'm telling. So when you go to ATM, what you will do?
Mhm.
You will swipe your card, right? You will swipe your card, means they will read your card number, correct?
Yes,
Or maybe there's some any identification kind of mechanism inside the card they will identify. Then you will put your key or maybe pin number, 4 number digit or 6 digit number, correct?
yes.
So when you put your key there or pin number there, what they will do,
Hmm.
they will keep that information in the form of request object, your card
Okay,
number and your pin number. This combination they will keep into the request object, and then
okay, okay.
once they will have that,
Understand.
you understand? That's what I'm.
Yes.
So
When you
once they
said
will have,
they're keeping our information request, then I understand.
yes, yes,
I thought they are confirming it with separately.
no, no, no. They can keep it call along with your credentials. That is
Yes.
what we do here.
Okay.
So
Okay, okay, okay. So they are confirming in request object.
correct.
Okay. Yeah, clear.
And
And
okay.
do we need to write in basics, how it, I mean, where it will be shown, this authentication? Will it shows while we run this one API?
So this is completely depend on what kind of authentic authorization part is being used by the third party channel. So let's say this API we are calling here, right? So they are using the basic authorization at their end.
Oh,
Okay. So they, when you create a contract along with you, let's say Bank of America, when they will create a contract initiation between other banks, what they will do, they will provide some information. What they will provide the information, they will give some kind of information. So first they will give us this information, the URL itself. This is the endpoint detail. They will create one document. They will document all information in that document. They will say, this is our final endpoint. Okay. Second thing, they will say what kind of request object they will allow in their at their side. So if say how Citibank knows what are the information I have to pass to call this endpoint. So along with this contract, they will know this is the request object. Bank of America will tell to other banks, um, this for this API, I need the request object in the form of these values. Let's say they are now just allowing to just username and password. So that is what they are expecting for this endpoint. Okay. Why I'm again and again saying for this because every request has their own uh, request object. Every endpoint their own request object and different response, correct? So for this
Mhm.
request, for this endpoint, they just want to provide you to this kind of credentials. Okay. And what
Okay.
kind of mechanism, authorization mechanism they are using? So they will define in the document itself. We are using basic authorization. So there are so many ways to authenticate the request and so many ways to authorize the request. First is basic authorization. Second is JWT token, and another is like OAuth implementation. So it's depend what authorization mechanism is being developed by the third party API. So that information they will communicate through the document with their channel partner bank.
Okay, can you please show me the request object in line number 35? What we are requesting?
Here,
Yes.
yeah. So here just we created header object, right? In the
Okay, okay,
request, we are just passing the header object. So in the header, you see here, we just passing the credentials only.
okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
So now it's very generic code. I will create in that format, which exactly it's needed. So now I'm just wanted to explain you how it works internally. Later, what we will do, we will receive this information from the API itself.
So just a quick question, sorry. In the request, do we need to tell uh, like Bank of America, that we need this information. Do we need to pass some parameters in our request or no?
Yeah. So uh, here I will explain so it will be more clear. Let me copy this endpoint. So this,
Let's
let's
say
say,
we need a customer's bank information, like name, first name, last name, bank amount, bank balance. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we need to pass all those parameters in request, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay.
So now see here, Bank of America exposed this endpoint. Just we are assuming, okay? They have exposed this endpoint. Now Citibank wanted to consume above API to get the response back from that their endpoint. So now Citibanks required some details. What kind of details? Uh, First is auth details. Okay. Second is
Hmm.
request object detail. Request object. What Citibank needs to pass. Okay.
Okay.
Second is what Citibank receive back from the above API response object. Clear?
Yes.
So far we just understanding the concept, and later we will debug this program. So you will understand more. Okay.
Yes.
So till now, I just defined this point. So you have to just focus on this point. Why? So first is we are calling this API itself using the REST template object. Okay. So
Hmm.
REST template has one method exchange. It allow us to provide some information. First thing URL, endpoint details. Second is type of method. Third is request object. Request object is nothing but it has the header information, and header contain the credentials. Okay. And second thing, what kind of response back we will receive while consuming this API. So this API will return us like string response. Okay. So we are holding it into the response entity type of string object. Once we will have this object response, what we can do in the response, we will have, there are so many information available like status code, then body itself, and I'll show you again so many things will be available while debugging this program. Okay. It is clear now, or any doubt?
No, look.
Okay. So since we just developed these services as a client, now what we have to do it? We have to call it somewhere, right? We have to call this method, call get all developer service. We have to call it. So what we can do, we can call it by our controller class itself. So let me show you quickly here. We have created this controller class. So in this controller class, we are just auto wiring now this service class where we have developed this code. Okay. In the controller class, we just auto wired this one, and we have just created one endpoints like get all developer record, get mapping, and it is just calling the client call. That's it. Okay.
Okay.
So let me run this program quickly and I'll show you. We will debug this program as well. Yeah. So our program has started on port number 8080. Okay. So what I'll do, we will call this endpoint from Postman. Okay. So we have our training module as well here, I think. So this is our local host, correct? 8080 and WS. This is the endpoint we have to call it. Now we have our created endpoints, and inside these endpoints we are calling third party API. And this mapping is get all developer records. So that is what I'm trying to call here. I'll just put the send request. So now our debug point has started. We came here. 1 second. Let me minimize it. So here, what I will do, I'll go inside this method. So far we are now in this method. So if you hover it on this request object, we are passing this authorization. It is a basic authorization. So now that credential which we have given in plain credential, that was like this, allow colon pass 123. Now it converted into like this in encoded format. Can you see here?
Yes.
So if you hover it on this part, you will see this encoded string. And why do we need this encoded string? Because when you pass some kind of object over the network, you don't want to give the actual object, right? You have
Yeah.
to send it to the encoded format. That is what, since it's a confidential thing, so you have to convert it into the encoded format. That's what we have done. All right.
Yes.
And now we have URL value, which is we are going to call it. Once I'll go back here. So see here now what will happen. So we received this response. So let's see what we have received. So in the body, if you see here, the data we have received, right? Developer name, technology, all this kind of information we have received. See here in the form of JSON or string, you can say. You see here status we received as a 200 because it was the successful call. Okay.
Yes.
And this some header information also we have received. So kind of data, it is a JSON data. On which date? Those date you have seen. All those kind of information you can see in the headers. Some kind of metadata informations. So let me quickly complete this execution and we'll see response back here. See here, we received that bunch of records. Okay. And status also 200. So it was deployed on this server, which was there. Let me show you again.
So here we
This.
are receiving all the responses
Mhm.
from
Sorry.
that API. But I am a little confused. Like in the request, we are passing only headers, right?
Correct.
So why we are receiving all other responses, like all other information from that API?
It's depend what kind of endpoint you are going to call. So you see here this endpoint itself saying get all developers, means whatever the developer information this endpoint has, it is returning back.
Okay. Can we control it on our end? Like we need only this information.
You can manipulate this response exactly. You, if you want to
Okay.
manipulate, how we can do it, I'll give you in few minutes that information.
Okay.
Okay.
So one more question, like, and does Bank of America need to do any specific thing to make it consumable, or they write just normal API and then Citibank can
Uh,
consume it, or they need
and
to do something extra?
yeah, so endpoint is like mean for just someone can consume it. That is what
Okay.
endpoint is mean for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is how we consume some third party API, and this was like very basic example as of now. But in subsequent tutorial, what we will do, we will create a separate response entity and response object and request object, and then we'll try to proceed further This was the example for only get, but in subsequent tutorial, we will understand like how to post and how to call the web service. Like if you trying to consume some API and you wanted to put into the post API call, how do we do it? That we will understand in subsequent tutorial. For now, yeah, we can wrap up this call and this session. And if you like this session, please like and subscribe. Uh, Thanks for watching this session.